Good morning, everyone. Let me know if you can hear me.
Good morning, sir.
Thank you, Sudha. Let's start on our last topic, which is firewalls and proxy. And hopefully, this will be last lecture for our course. So we'll look at firewall and then proxy. In the syllabus mentions proxy. It refers to textbook 2, chapter 10, and chapter 10 has no details of proxy. I'll try to give you my view of proxy, what it means. Even on the firewall, textbook is a very skimpy description, just one page, starting half a page here and half a page in the next book, and that's it. So it's very, very superficial description that is given in the textbook. So first few slides are from the textbook capturing what it says. Then I go into little more detail, indicating you what a firewall would be, how does it do, expanding upon the topic which is very skimpily mentioned in the textbook. And then I'll talk about proxy, which has been mentioned in syllabus, but it has not been covered in the chapter. So I don't know how it is going to ask you. But let me give my view so that at least you understand and write your own way, depending on how the questions are. So essentially, what is a firewall? The job of firewall is to protect and primarily protect the guys inside from the outside. When you put a house, you put a lock, you sleep, your house door becomes a firewall because nobody can enter unless you allow it, and that becomes your firewall to protect you from anybody busting by stealing things from the house. In network, you don't want every Tom, Dick, and Harry to come or go out of your network. So it's basically the most popular mechanism for networks to provide security. Of course, there could be different ways. Somebody can monitor, look at individually things, prevent, allow, block. But firewall is the most suitable, most convenient mechanism to provide protection. Initially, firewalls were basically put in software, but now most of the places it is in hardware. Of course, you can put in software for specific needs, but in general, it is a hardware device. But on desktop like Windows, you always have by default firewall turned on. Objective is to prevent somebody accessing your machine. Otherwise, the people will attack and things will become tougher. In reality, it basically you can treat as some kind of a router because job of router is to connect internal network to outside network. So it sits in the path, looks at every packet. It doesn't really route packets, but looks at every packet and make a decision whether this packet should be allowed to forward it or packet should be dropped. And hence it is in a router with a special software program which basically acts upon the packet being received or transmitted and takes suitable action appropriately. In general, it is placed between the outside world and the network inside. For example, this is internet, this is the router, and you have a firewall here. Or sometimes you can see firewall here between corporate router. So there are two kind of firewalls. One is called internal firewall and one is called external firewall. External firewall between router and the internet, or just after the router, there's another router that looks at internal network and then connects. An internal firewall looking individual networks and block it. But book doesn't talk about anything, so I'll leave it there as it is. So you can look at you have a router which is public internet and you have a local internet, and you basically have a firewall as part of the network somewhere which looks at each and every packet and then decide should the packet be allowed. Job is look at the packet, determine it's a good packet, sent by the people who can be trusted. If you see a packet which is spurious, you don't trust or not a response request, you don't want to allow, and something of that kind. And that's the job of firewall does, and this is what we'll basically look at. So how does firewall provide protections? Its basic job is to identify any unwanted websites, hackers. Like you may want to visit some certain website. Those website may want to send some traffic to you as a response, and those could be a bad response, or it could be scripts which could cause attacks, so it may prevent those kind of things coming in. And generally, as I said, either is between network router and internet, or between network router and the internal network. So once you put between network router and internet, that is called external firewall. And once you put between router and the internal network, that is internal firewall. And at times you put both. Job of external firewall is to prevent attack from outside. Job of internal firewall is to make sure only people who are able to communicate each other, only those who are authorized, and not anybody can talk to anybody, even to prevent traffic and that kind of scenario as well. In a large corporation, a network is connected at multiple points with multiple links. So putting in firewall only in the main link is not going to work. Typically, you might have noticed when you look at the large corporates, when the employees typically they don't enter via main gate, you have a main gate and there's a back gate. And all the security and all that paraphernalia is at the main gate. To avoid that, employee go through simply back gate and come out and go back in with the minimal security there. And those could become a weak point. Because the back gate is not known to anybody else other than employee. Only they have the keys, so they have unfettered access. But in the internet world, any link that connects organization to outside world has to be protected by firewall, because if there is no firewall there at some links, that could become a weak point, and attackers are always on the prowl to look for a weak point and attack. As we said, main objective is to monitor, look at the traffic. So all these 4 slides are primarily from the book. Talks about firewall very, very generic. Then I talk about little bit specific, and then we would close. So look at traffic. Is it coming from unknown source, unknown place? As they say, when you get an email from unknown place, simply drop it because it could be having a trouble there. Especially don't open any attachments, because attachment could be carrying a virus, and the moment you open an attachment, the virus in the attachment could infect your machine. So be aware, be careful of that. And when it monitors, the objective is if there is an attacker there, prevent the attacker to enter. Don't give access to system inside, because internally you normally have free access. Like once you are in a campus, you can freely roam around. But to get into a campus could be a challenge. So we want to make sure that no unwanted guy even accesses one system, because once it accesses one system, if one internal system is compromised, then that system can be used to launch attacks. So how does firewall typically work? It basically, when the company installs a firewall, they define specific rules, and rules depend upon the company's policy. Companies say all employees are allowed to access internet freely, or they may say all employees are allowed to access only company website, but not other website, or all employees can access company website, partner website, but not open internet, or any kind of policies, whichever way you would like to decide. So company decides the policies, and firewall allows you to implement those policies by implementing the respective rules. And that's the way a firewall typically works. You can define firewall into different categories depending on the view. One could be, you can say, software firewall or a hardware firewall, or you can say external firewall or internal firewall. So question comes, you can probably answer both. Depending on the view where you place it, from placement positioning, it is internal firewall or external firewall. External firewall is between router and the internet. Internal firewall is between router and the internal network. And you could have a multiple internet firewalls separating each department and so forth. On the other hand, we can define it as a software firewall or a hardware firewall. So software firewall typically is a software program that is installed on a computer system. Like you have a PC, laptop, you are running Windows, and Windows always comes with own firewall, and that is example of software firewall. On Linux system, there is a package available called UFW, called Unix Firewall, which is again a software firewall. So these software firewalls generally protect a single system and not multiple systems. So if let's say a corporate has 100 systems, and if you are dealing with software firewall, then IT admin has to tweak, install, configure all these 100 systems for software firewalls. And since user may admin right, it may remove those firewalls and could create the violation of security and create a weak hole and could jeopardize the security of the corporate network. So typically in a corporate, you always put what is called a hardware firewall. In a hardware firewall is a device, dedicated device, and it's a big business. You have the Checkpoint network, you have Barracuda firewall, you have Palo Alto networks. They all deal with firewall and security. And the devices, the cost, they're not cheap. The devices cost $50,000, $100,000 onwards, and something of that kind. Companies prefer hardware firewalls because it is easy to manage. They're installed in a central place. And because it's central place, at one place, one can easily implement the corporate policies and one doesn't need to deal with individual systems. So it becomes very, very effective. The single point of entry where every traffic comes in and the policies can check what traffic to allow, who is logging in, who can be allowed or who cannot be allowed, something of that kind. And because I'm implementing policies only at one place, it is easy to monitor, manage, and bar anybody unwanted guy. If I had to install and configure and manage hundreds of thousands of systems, it practically becomes nightmare. And especially when user can tweak those firewall rules. So corporate prefers a hardware firewall in the corporate provider so that user doesn't have to bother about the installing and operating and preventing. So especially when you install a firewall or software firewall on a laptop, you install a new package, it prevents no firewall is not allowing disable firewall, so always inconvenience. So in that sense, corporate user would prefer a hardware firewall. As an individual user at home, you may prefer a software firewall at your laptop. At times, corporate also places it on the link which is high data traffic, just to make sure that in the name of high data traffic, somebody is not simply flooding high data traffic and bombarding and maybe causing a DOS attack. To monitor that activity is also installed there. How does firewall is implemented? The book describes 3 methods, which to me are not complete or not really standard. Where any standard you see, they define 3 different categories. But nonetheless, since book defines the 3 different methods, I'll talk about it. But in general, firewall 3 methods, which I'll talk in a short while, are different methods. First, they say is packet filtering based on destination address. So when a firewall gets a packet, it looks at the destination address and decide, is this destination allowed? And if destination is allowed, then firewall will filter the forward the packet, otherwise drop. For example, for outside world, they can say only web server the destination is allowed, web server and port 80. So firewall will allow only packet to the IP address of web server on port 80 or 443, and any other packet could be disabled. Same way, if internal users are going outside, they may say firewall will allow only web traffic to go out and no other traffic. So these kind of firewalls are called packet filtering. Packet filtering firewalls are those which look at each packet individually. When they look at packet 1 and look at packet 2, looking at packet 2 doesn't even bother about what was done to packet 1. So each packet is being looked at independently, irrespective of other packet. There is no correlation to other packet when a packet is looked at. And that is called packet filtering firewall. Now, if rule says the packet does not meet, it says that the packet is coming from outside for a given web server and destination address correspond to some other IP address which is not a web server, then that packet would be dropped. So typically packets are discarded and if firewall rules follow. And generally, when firewall drops a packet, it does not inform a sender that the packet has been dropped. Because the thinking is if it informs, then attacker would know this IP is blocked, let me try another IP. So they don't want to let it know that this IP is blocked. So whenever they drop a packet, they simply drop without sending any information back that this packet has been dropped. So rules can be made to specific IP, port number, and when I go into details or examples, I'll talk about it, but book doesn't have these examples. So you refer to textbook 1 by Kuros and Ross, and they have little better examples to help you understand how the packet filtering firewall works. The other rules could be you want to allow only internal traffic to a particular machine. You don't want anybody to access DB directly. So a firewall can say only application server would be allowed, but no DB. And DB can only be allowed from application server. So if any user tried to access DB directly, again, those would be dropped. So again, depends what the corporate policy is, how the rules are defined, and they decide based upon that. Second category says is packet filtering based on source IP address. To me, both whether destination address and source IP address, both are called packet filtering. And both of them belongs to what I call is stateless packet filtering. So the categorization given by the book, packet filtering based on destination, first method, packet filtering based on source IP address, is actually one part of stateless packet filtering. So in that sense, book doesn't talk about correctly or it talks about incompletely about packet filtering. All it does is, when you look at the source, it knows the few attacker IP addresses, it allow only traffic from those, or it will allow traffic only who comes from VPN or whatever mechanism. So look at the source IP address, and if source IP does not belong to permitted IP address, it will simply block those packets. And third category of firewall, the book says is prevent DOS attack. We have seen the denial of service DOS attack. It could be SYN flooding attack. It could be ICMP Smurf attack or something of that kind. So it looks at is it a DOS attack? If so, it identifies it and prevents the DOS attack as well. So let us look at in general. So this is where the book is over. That's all the book talks about, very, very generic, high level. So now go into little more details so that you can understand how the typical firewall is. And most of this material is from your textbook 1, which is by Kuros and Ross. So generally, all the literature, all the standards talks about 3 types of firewall. One is called stateless packet filtering. Other is called stateful packet filtering. And I'll talk about the difference in a short while. And third category is application gateway. So stateless packet filtering is, it looks at each packet individually. And when I'm looking at packet, I do not consider what happened to other packets. And that's the meaning of stateless. That means it does not maintain any state information what has happened in the past. So firewall just looks at the packet when packet comes and decide what is to be done with this packet and based on rules. So it looks at all the rules, look at the incoming packet, matches the rules, and then decide what is to be done with this packet. Filtering could be based on source IP address, destination IP address, port number. Just 1 minute, guys. Sir, I'm in a class. I'll call you back. I'm in a class. I'll call you back. Or kind of ICMP messages, something of that kind. So let's look at the example of stateless packet filtering. You can put a policy that no outside web access. That means any packet going to any IP address with port 80 is not allowed. You're preventing web access to anybody, or you allow access only to authorized people. Or you can say nobody can come inside, connect to internal. So you may have a server in the lab, but you're not allowed to connect to them from outside the college. So all the firewalls in the college, they do not allow any incoming connections unless you specifically drill a hole in the network. It can also look at any web, podcast traffic. So look at all UDP packets, disable all UDP packets, don't want any podcast to be allowed. Or somebody doing a DOS attack, basically somebody sends a packet to an internal broadcast address. That means ICMP packet will be delivered to every machine in the network, and then everybody would respond to particular source IP, and that will cause a spoofed Smurf attack. So firewall can block any broadcast IP address ICMP query, because that will causing basically flooding of ICMP response packet. It will choke the link, it will choke the server. So that is called ICMP response. So each packet is looked at individually by itself and action taken. Or even you want to block trace routed. Trace routing works by setting TTL is equal to 1. When TTL becomes 0, router sends a packet. Then you look at the next packet exploring, TTL becomes 2. First router it becomes 1. Then it becomes 0. Then router discards the packet and send a response. So anytime it says that the packet which is reporting on TTL expiry, like port error, ICMP error, it simply drops those packets. So you will not be able to do trace route. So sometimes you see when you do a trace route, it's not working mainly because the firewalls has prevented all trace route packets. Some examples of stateless packet filtering. These are also called ACLs or access control list defined in terms of packet. For example, rule says if source IP belongs to this network, destination any IP other than this 222.22.0.0. If it's a TCP connection, TCP protocol, and destination port is 80, and source port is anything above 1023. That means any machine in the internal network can access any web server outside because traffic is 80. So this allows, that means this rule says allow all the users of the network to access any web server outside. Now this only allows outgoing packet. Now when web server sends a response back, you have to allow incoming packet. Because we are doing stateless, so incoming packet will not match, so they'll be dropped. So we need to have a rule for matching incoming packet as well. And so respective rule would be any packet from outside the network which comes to machine inside with source port 80, meaning traffic coming from web server, and to the port number more than 1023, that means it is a reply packet from the web server allowed. So these two rules together typically allow the web traffic. Other example rules could be, look, you want to allow all DNS traffic, because as a user, when you want to access web, let's say you type yahoo.com, first query goes to DNS server. So you like to permit DNS traffic. So say any machine within the network to any machine outside the network, UDP traffic, because DNS runs on UDP, destination port is 53, which indicate DNS traffic, and then say allow or disable, and so on and so forth. If we say allow act something flag bit, DNS there's no flag bit, so basically allow. So allow the DNS traffic, and similarly you can do allow. So if and everything else is denied, that means this firewall will allow only DNS traffic to go out, and a response from DNS server, web traffic to go out, and response from the web server. Any other kind of traffic is not allowed. So if you try to do SSH, or somebody try to do access from inside, or somebody try to access a web server which is lying inside from outside, all that would be disallowed. So this is stateless firewall example, which is implemented by means of ACL. Now, if you look at the previous rule, let's look at the second rule. If somebody has not accessed it, but somebody attacker simply sends it ACK packet using port number 80, then this will allow. And so even though there is no request by the user, randomly it will allow, and this could be a hole. So this can only be addressed if firewall maintains an state and says response should only be allowed when the request has gone out and not otherwise. If you maintain that information, that is called stateful firewall. So a stateful firewall, you basically look at is the TCP connection established. So unless the TCP SYN-ACK handshake is completed, do not allow any TCP packets. Otherwise, that could be a route. So when firewall maintains a state information, how many connections are established, and the packet coming is belongs to the established TCP connection, then only it will be allowed and not otherwise. So and once a connection has been closed using FIN packet, drop the connection. The firewall maintains a state of connection, for example, TCP connection, and then takes action, then that becomes stateful firewall. And that is what typically most of the firewalls support. And if there is no traffic on a particular connection, then again it will drop. It has to maintain the state, because let's say traffic is established, stateful connection, and machine is simply dropped. Now attacker could still use it to send a traffic there, but there is no such thing. So to prevent all kind of things, you always have a timeout on a stateful firewall, and that way it works. Next category is application gateways. In an organization, you would like to allow some user to go outside. Let's say IT admin, you have set up in a cloud, and only those IT admin people should be able to do SSH to those servers or running application access. So typically what happens is you install application gateway. So those users first connect to those application gateways, and then application gateway connects to outside world. So as a user, you cannot access the application directly. You always go application gateway inside, and then application gateway connects to the outside world. And that is typically done for a specific application you want to access. So you say other than the web is common, you want to access one particular application, you want to access your own private application, then those things are done using the application gateway. So primarily means each user should telnet to gateway, then gateway will authorize as a user, gateway will talk to outside world, and once it gets a response, it connects the two, and then those will be allowed. Any other user which is not authorized would be blocked. Sometimes you have seen in most of the corporate, even for a web traffic, first you have to authenticate. Authenticate giving credentials. Only when you do that, then they're allowed to go out. In our colleges, I don't know what we do. That's what the typical case would be. With the NIL allowed, we do not have such a great firewall person. So this brings to the end of discussion on our firewall. Another topic in the syllabus is proxy server. And as I said, if you look at the syllabus, module says packet filtering, proxy server, textbook 2, and I look at the textbook 2, and in the whole book, there's nothing called proxy. So I'm giving a material from proxy server from the textbook 1, so that at least you get the idea. So there are two kinds of proxy servers I'll talk about. One is for caching, which is primarily installed in an office network or a college network or a corporate network to improve the performance. Let's say most of us access some website, Google or even Yahoo or Hindustan Times or Deccan Herald or whatever, a lot of news items, a lot of images, videos. Then rather than each one accessing those and choking the internet link, proxy could be doing caching. So mostly it is a cache server and a lot of content gets served from this cache. So you can look at the example, assuming you have a network, local network which is 100 Mbps LAN, with a number of users, and each user accesses the internet and response is about 1 megabyte. Assume that you have about request going to origin servers and user in the corporate LAN makes 15 requests per second. And your link is 15 megabits. You have 15 users, on the average, the number of users may be 100, 200, but on the average, they make 15 requests per second, and response contains, size of response is 1 megabit, and the internal link to the office is 15 megabit. And that the round trip time from this router to the internet servers and back is about 2 seconds. So if there is no traffic on that link, it will take 2 seconds because that is what transmission and propagation delay is. But if the link is choked, there may be queuing of packets, then they might see much longer delay. So in this case, what happens? Because I am making on the average 15 requests per second, and each request I get a response of 1 megabit. So packets which are coming back will be getting 15 megabits per second traffic. And that is my capacity. So my link is 100% occupied. My link is 100% occupied, even though my LAN traffic is only 15%, but my internal link is 100% occupied. And when link is fully occupied, by theory, it has a huge queuing delay, and that means we're supposed to be second. Typical packet will take minutes to get the response. So as a result, when user accesses the web or the servers, their response time is in terms of minutes and not seconds, which is a very bad user experience. User complains, internet is too slow, get a faster link. So what are the choices? So one choice for college admin or corporate admin is increase the link capacity. So let's say from 15 megabit per second, you increase the link capacity to 150 megabits per second. When you increase the link capacity to 150 megabit per second, now what happens? My still same traffic, 15 requests per second, and each request results in 1 megabit. So I'll be getting 15 megabits of per second traffic. My capacity is 150 megabits. That means my access link is 10%. And since my propagation and transmission delay is 2 seconds, my overall delay would be 2 seconds plus milliseconds of local and microseconds, on the average 2 seconds. But going from 15 Mbps link to 150 Mbps link on the internet, cost becomes huge. Not even 10 times, the more bandwidth we get, cost becomes increasingly more, and this becomes a very costly phenomenon. And corporate would like to avoid that. So can we do something about it? And that is where the notion of cache server or the proxy server comes in. So install a local web cache, which we call proxy. And how does it help the server? We still have our original internet link of 15 Mbps. We assume, let's say, when people accesses, some traffic would be served by local cache and some would go to internet. So how do you compute the whatever response time and bandwidth is? Let's assume that 60% request goes to the main server and 40% is served by the local cache. Because once the request has been served, it will maintain the local cache of images, videos, other stuff. So a lot of stuff could be served from the local cache. So even assuming that this web cache server handles 40% traffic and only 60% traffic goes out, so let us look at what our response time would be. Now because 60% is coming, that means out of 15 Mbps, 15 into 6, only 9 megabits would be coming here. So we're getting only 60% occupancy on this link, And since this link is not 100% occupied, it will not have a heavy queuing delay. It will get a response in same 2 milliseconds as the response time. Now 40% traffic is being served from the local cache server. So if I were to compute my average delay, 60% will come from this, which is 2 seconds. 40% will come from the local cache, which is millisecond. So 60% into 2.01 plus 40% into milliseconds, I roughly get about 1.2 seconds, which is better than 2 seconds, even when we got 150 megabit link. So by installing a cache, it is a one-time cost. It's much cheaper than paying on the annual basis to the high-speed link. And that way, using a proxy cache server improves the performance of the user and get a better user experience. This is the one use of called proxy. It's called local proxy. It's also called proxy caching. Another kind of proxy used for anonymity and privacy. As a user, you would like to make sure that when you access things, you remain anonymous. You don't want to know. For example, you don't want to reveal your IP address. You don't want your local ISP or local traffic to know which website you visited. You don't even want what kind of data you are exchanging. Why that is useful? For example, let's say I want to access some website in US or Canada or something. Let's say I want to access Amazon. By default, the moment I access Amazon.in or Amazon.com, they'll automatically redirect you to Amazon.in. And it will be a nightmare for you to convince that you want to access Amazon.com US website or Amazon.ca Canada website rather than the Amazon.India website. Or there are some websites who allow traffic only coming from US and not from outside US. I was accessing some university or some US federal government website, and they simply even prevent my login, even though an account, because they upgraded their servers and say it's only for local US guys. So how do I do that? The only way is install a proxy. So have an SSL server installed somewhere in the other outside network. Then you connect to that SSL proxy server using SSL. Now, since you are using SSL, traffic between me and the proxy server is encrypted. So nobody can know what is traffic being sent. So requirement 3, that local ISP can snoop on my data would not be possible because they are encrypted. Since I'm sending a request to the proxy server, my ISP can only know I'm going to proxy server, but not to actual website. And the actual web doesn't know that traffic is coming from me. They think traffic is coming from the proxy server, which is locally somewhere, and they allow. And this way, you basically, let's say you connect to a proxy server, you send request to the proxy server would send a request to the actual web server, gets a response, and sends a response back. So in a way, you set up a VPN tunnel between you and the proxy server, and whole traffic goes through that, and nobody can see that, and that way you can meet. So you can be anonymous, and you can maintain your privacy and do that. So there are different application servers available. Some are free, some are paid for. In a free, they allow limited access. For example, when I needed to access some website in US, but they allow only US traffic, I installed a client application called Windscribe. It works for the laptop, it works for the mobile phone as well. And then there is a free service as well as paid service. I used only free service. That means now all my traffic will go to that server, and from that server it would go to where it has to go to. And that would put them in anonymous. There are other services as well which you can explore, so look at. So in case you want to make sure that nobody should know in the college or outside, you can look at those VPN servers and access it. The only thing is college can block those VPN servers, then you are helpless, but you can always find one or the other and do that. So this brings to the end of our course. So what we studied today, we look at the firewalls. We looked at 3 categories of firewalls, packet filtering firewalls. As far as book is concerned, it said packet filtering firewall for destination base, packet filtering firewall for source base, which are an example of stateless packet filtering firewall. Then we also look at stateful firewall, which basically allows traffic only when a connection is established. And then looking at the application gateways. Then we look at the proxy, which is the proxy cache that help improve user performance, user experience. And we also look at the anonymity and privacy for the proxy server. And this brings to the end. So we have covered the entire course. So if you have any question, you can ask me, or you want any other classes, you can approach your class rep. He can coordinate with me. And for any topic you want me to cover, I'll probably can schedule a class and do that. But tomorrow and after tomorrow, we have the CSI convention. So there will be no classes as far as I am concerned. But any other day, if you want any extra class, let me know the topic. So talk to your class rep, which is Gautam, we can coordinate and we can do. Otherwise, have a good time, enjoy. Towards the end of the week, I'll be giving you an assignment, home assignment 3, and we expect to complete next week. And that's going to be mostly based on your RSA algorithms and your diffie element key exchange, something of that kind based on basic security. Thank you. If no questions, you can probably drop.